high school, and I'm gonna try and keep it a little bit quicker, a little bit shorter, because we started a little bit late. Um, but a little bit more about me before I start. I'm just in high school like everyone else here. I'm a rising junior, 15 years old, a little bit younger for my grade, and I am homeschooled. So I think that's a little bit of a, I think that's a pretty important detail in how I was able to get a lot of the opportunities that I have. But it's definitely not impossible for those who are not homeschooled or not independent study. Right now, I'm working as a software engineering intern at a company called Restfo, where I work on their backend Ionic framework for the cross-platform mobile, iOS, and web versions, I believe. I've been programming for around a year and a half, coming up on 2 years. And I also used to participate in a lot of hackathons, and I still do. I used to compete, but nowadays I'm mostly a mentor. I mostly lead workshops where I judge or I organize. And I think a couple more important details about these internships are I didn't have any connections with the company or anyone inside of the company. It was raw just from the job listing. I didn't know them beforehand. And another thing is that these are not high school internships. So some other high schoolers, they get internships as well. But it's mostly different programs by companies like Verizon or Cisco that are aimed at high school students. But all of my colleagues are graduates or grad students or undergraduates in computer science, or they're making a pivot from one of my colleagues is pivoting from finance into computer science, so he's trying to do an internship to get started. So I think just to keep that in mind, that kind of differs from a high school internship from the tech internship that I'm talking about. So we're going to be talking about LinkedIn, but then we're also going to be talking about a few other tools. I want to talk about tools like LinkedIn and GitHub, and then other tools that I might come across later on that will kind of help you when you're searching for jobs and applying. And then another thing is that I'm not going to be touching on interviews and making sure that goes through well, just because there's a lot of different articles out there on completing interviews for internships or any job in general. And whether once you're inside of the room with your interviewer, it doesn't really matter how old you are. But when you're applying, it really does matter because it changes what kind of experiences you'll have and what kind of information you should put on certain things like your LinkedIn or your resume. So LinkedIn, I'm not really gonna introduce what each of these tools are. I assume that everyone knows it, but LinkedIn is definitely a good place to list a lot of your experiences and a lot of your skills because they literally have different sections just for that. And the way you optimize your profile is really, really important because your profile basically helps. If you optimize the SEO of your profile, it'll not only show higher on a Google search engine when someone searches up your name, but then also if someone tries to find you or one of your companies in the LinkedIn search engine, you'll pop up higher. And so I think it's really important that you make your profile look very good and you optimize it the way that if you read up on articles, it'll pop up higher. And there's not necessarily one thing to do this. For example, I took around 2 to 3 days, and I kind of just did a lot of research on Google. I did a lot of research on, okay, well, should I be adding different alt text to images that I put on my profile? Should I be linking different resources to each of my experiences and things like that? And so based on that, you can really kind of gauge what you should do to make your profile stand out from everyone else who's applying for the same job or the same internship. But besides actually looking for jobs and looking for internships, it's a great place to get advice from a lot of successful people because successful people are all over the place on LinkedIn and they're always just one connection request away and one message away. And you can also build valuable connections there. And that's where people can refer you, people can give you a good word and hopefully get you some kind of connection within the company. I didn't, but that's definitely a good strategy. Um, and one thing to keep in mind with LinkedIn is that you're probably not going to get recruited. Um, and it's kind of broadcasted. If you kind of scroll down your feed and you follow the right people on LinkedIn, you'll kind of know that everyone knows that people really don't get recruited on LinkedIn. And those who do get recruited on LinkedIn or get the requests, I get a couple of LinkedIn recruiting requests every now and then, but they don't necessarily look the most trustworthy. So don't really count on being recruited on LinkedIn, but rather just focus on actually building those connections. And especially since we're in high school, no one instinctively wants to recruit a high schooler just because they'd rather hire someone in college or someone who just graduated, someone with the skill set and a major to actually show that they have that kind of skill. And there's also a lot of competition on LinkedIn. As I said, a lot of successful people are on LinkedIn. So a lot of those recruiting requests that are very, very limited are going to go to those who are really, really successful, that have the skills to actually complete it and do really well in that internship. So a few tips on LinkedIn is to first of all have a profile picture, not necessarily for the SEO, but mostly just because profile pictures really, really help with your branding. You really want to put your face on your LinkedIn profile because that's the first thing people see, and first impressions are everything in any industry, and especially on LinkedIn. You know, a lot of accounts without profile pictures, I really personally, I don't really feel the need to or the want to connect with them or to kind of start a conversation with them or anything like that. So definitely have a profile picture. And another thing that you want to do is you want to have a description. By description, I actually should change this to headline. So everyone gets to have a bio on their LinkedIn profile, but they don't, a lot of people don't really pay too much attention to their headline, or they don't put as much care as they should into their headline. And basically your headline is the one or two sentences that you can put right underneath your profile picture. And the reason why this is so important is it also contributes to the first impression, because the first things that any recruiter will see, or anyone who visits your LinkedIn profile, would be your profile picture and your headline. And so you really want to have those two to be really, really strong. And depending on who you are, you will have different headlines. But what I can say is you definitely don't want to put student at your school if you're in high school. So if you're in college, you can put student at this college or somewhere else, but you really don't want to do that when you're in high school, because we don't necessarily want to hide the fact we want to necessarily hide the fact we're in high school, but we don't want to lie that we're not, if that makes sense. It goes back to the point that I'll continue to drill in, is that, you know, no one instinctively wants to hire a high schooler, so you shouldn't really be blasting it all over your first impression. And especially since everyone else is putting student at their school, that will just make you blend in. For work experiences, depends on if you actually have past work experiences. I would hope that you guys do. But one thing that I will say is that you shouldn't put work experiences that really aren't work experiences. Now, if you're kind of volunteering, depending on what kind of volunteering work it is, if you're working without compensation, that's something you should definitely put under work experiences. If you're volunteering, put it under your volunteering experience. If you have none of them, I would suggest putting nothing instead of putting something that is so obviously not work experiences, because in some ways it looks very, very desperate. And so, for example, one time I stumbled across a LinkedIn account, and this guy put software engineer at self-employed at a null company for 4 years, basically signaling that he's been programming for 4 years. And so that's the only thing that he had. And I found that a lot less appealing than someone who actually just didn't have any work experiences at all. And last will be your skills. And you want to list all the skills that you have, because your skills also determine what recruiters will be looking for, because it actually pays into what your SEO will look like. And then also will suggest certain results in your feed based on what skills you have listed. So make sure you keep those updated. And also to keep them validated. So you obviously want to get your skills endorsed, but then you also want to take something called a LinkedIn skill quiz. And so for certain technical skills, like certain programming languages or frameworks or tools, LinkedIn will have certain quizzes that you can take once every 3 months. And basically, if you get over 80% on that quiz, it'll give you a certain icon that basically says LinkedIn approved, which basically adds to the credibility that you know what you're talking about in terms of that skill. And if you fail it, it's not going to show up anywhere. You just won't be able to take the test for the next 3 months, and then you can try it again. So I would definitely suggest try and take the skills quiz for every single skill that you feel confident in. So next will be GitHub. We are talking about tech internships here. And so I get a lot of questions after these types of workshops where they ask me about research or, any, I guess, other science related internships that I can't give an answer for. But if we're talking about tech internships, we gotta introduce GitHub. And it's basically our technical portfolio. And you really have to keep it updated, especially since recently GitHub came out with a few extra branding features on your personal profile that will really give you the ability to add some personality and some style to your profile. And I'm not going to go too much into it, but basically it answers these questions when someone looks at your profile and what kind of repositories and projects you work on. It's basically just, what do you specialize in? What kind of problems do you work on? And do you code actively? Are you an active developer? And the reason why it answers this is, what do you specialize in? Well, I can see that you build a lot of projects in Python, or you build a lot of projects in JavaScript or Node.js or Django or whatever it may be. What kind of problems do you work on? Do you work on real world problems? Like, are the projects that you're working on actually useful? Is it something that I would use? Or is it like something pretty stupid that no one really needs? No one really needs this project, no matter how difficult it is or complex or impressive it is. If it's like kind of just a stupid concept, it's not necessarily the best thing to look at. And or if you don't code at all, you have no repositories, that just shows that you don't code at all. And that ties into being an active developer. And I'm not going to go into it because we're short on time. But if you go to your GitHub profile and you scroll down a little bit, there's gonna be a dashboard of a bunch of squares, and each square basically represents one day out of the whole last year, so the last 365 days. And so basically it'll shade in darker to how many contributions and commits you made that day. And so that may seem like kind of useless, but it basically provides a visualization that anyone can see within a glance that, oh, okay, he's been coding for a long time. He's been coding consistently. It's not just sporadic days, because then you'll see that. But if it's consistent, you'll see pretty much every single day shaded in a light green or a darker green, however many contributions you make each day. So a few tips on GitHub would be maintain your commit history, which basically means maintain that commit dashboard that I was just talking about, because that is really, really important to show how active you are as a developer. Don't delete old repositories. I've been asked by some people, should I delete my old repository that I made from school because it was for an assignment or something like that? Unless it's something really, really embarrassing, or it's something that no one really wants to see, then you can delete it. But if it's not, then you really want to keep it, because no one's really going to look at it, but it'll add to your repository count. And third would be just code, because you really can't maintain your commit dashboard, and you can't really show off your repositories or anything that I just talked about if you don't code and you push the code to GitHub. So third would be your resume. I'm sure you all know what a resume is, but a few things that I see with certain resumes, because I've actually gone through recruiting processes for some of my initiatives as well. And basically what I've noticed with other people's resumes is, first of all, some people don't have them, which is completely ridiculous, because if you go to certain job listing sites, I'm not going to list each one individually, but basically if you sign up there, they will basically ask you for a couple bits of information. They'll ask for your name, your email, all that kind of stuff, but then they'll also ask for your resume. And they'll also ask for a cover letter, which I'm not going to talk about. But basically, the resumes are so, in some people's perspective, they're outdated. But at the end of the day, no matter what it is, resumes are very, very default. And so everyone should have one. So first of all, you should have one. And it's super easy to create one, because it's pretty much a shorter reflection of your LinkedIn profile. And it's what employers see first. So that ties into the whole first impression thing. But then a few tips is that, or I guess one that has a lot of components to it, would be to make it yourself. There are a lot of resume template builders out there, and I have nothing against those resume template builders. But the thing is that when everyone starts to use them, it really starts to kind of dilute uniqueness in your resume. I suggest building your resume in not Google Doc, but maybe something in Figma or Adobe XD. So you can actually add some color, some personality, or anything else to your resume that will actually exude your personal brand, which is also very important when you're applying. Another thing is to make it one page long. Now, unless you're a work professional with like years of experiences and you just came out of an executive role and you're trying to look for a different one, then yeah, you'll have multiple pages of experience because you've been doing it for so long, but that obviously does not apply to anyone here. So we should always have it as one page long. And the reason why, and I can attest this firsthand, is that because recruiters don't want to spend so much time. Um, Recruiters have to search through hundreds and hundreds of applications and resumes, throughout just like a certain period of days. And so you really don't want to make them scroll past one page just to see your whole resume. And chances are they won't, which means any important info that you left on the second page or the third page will not be seen. I would also say for the fourth thing would be everyone should have a personal website. I think having a personal website is great. And even if you're not applying, personal websites are a great way to kind of increase your digital footprint. It'll really help get your name out there, your brand out there. And this is a little bit more besides the point of internships, but it's actually very, very important if you are applying for internships. And it's basically a way that you can, if you are a developer, if you are a web developer specifically, it can really help to show what kind of style you have in terms of development. Especially if you're in web design or in marketing, you really want to show what kind of style you have in terms of what you perceive as good design. And it's the basis of your personal brand. Like, at least for me, whenever I kind of think of a different developer or I want to know more about a certain developer, and they give me the certain options of, okay, well, here's my LinkedIn, here's my GitHub, and then here's my personal website. I always go to the personal website first, because the personal website can have information that you can't necessarily put elegantly on LinkedIn or GitHub or anything else, because you get all the space you can. So yeah, I would say everyone here should be building their own personal website, whether you're a developer or not, and no matter what kind of developer you are. If you're more into embedded systems or low-level programming and you don't necessarily know how to build a website, you should try and learn, or you should at least use elegant website builders. So I'm not talking in terms of Wix and Weebly, because their websites are not necessarily built for personal, but I'm talking in terms of Webflow or Your or anything like that. So definitely look into building your own personal website, and especially if you're in web development, make it yourself, even if you're a backend developer, because backend web developers still have to make front-end UIs anyways. So a few tips. You can put whatever information you want, and you can put in whatever style you want. But one thing, a good rule of thumb is to not write too much. Don't write a novel. I've visited a couple of websites before that have had way too much text about themselves, and it's all just text. It's literally just me reading. There's nothing enjoyable to see there. And unless you can put it in a really, really elegant format, you really shouldn't be writing too much, but instead format certain elements to make it visually appealing. You want to emphasize impressive projects. And I'll talk a little bit more about projects later, but you want to emphasize your best projects instead of just displaying all of them in the same format. You want to add your own twist. As I said, you get full responsibility, and you can take as much action as you want in terms of what you want your website to look like in terms of your own skill. Obviously, you have to have the skill to implement it. So you want to add your own twist, basically like, okay, well, maybe I'll change to certain colors or have certain additions that really attain to who I am. And you also don't want to make it too flashy, which is something I struggle with a little bit, just because I like to make my websites a little bit different. But you really don't want to go too crazy. I visited some websites where when you scroll, they implement certain JavaScript functions where it actually moves it sideways like a slider, and though it's really cool and aesthetic, at the end of the day, it's really confusing to use, and not to mention it messes up the whole mobile experience. So you really don't want to go too crazy. And I'm not going to go into it, but if you guys want to see my website, which is just calix.dev, you can see what I say by emphasize certain projects, where I give my best projects more space than I do with the rest of my projects, and certain twists that I've added to make mine a little bit different from everyone else's. So projects are an absolute must. I, was thinking about why developers don't necessarily have as many certifications as someone in IT a couple months ago. And I was thinking this because I was just kind of curious, like, why are there so many IT certifications, but there's barely any for development? There are some for low-level programming in C, but then those types of certifications are needed because they work with embedded systems. And so if you make errors there, that could be a huge issue. But I was curious for not like more of like a top level developer. And so what I realized is that certifications are basically just a formal way to show that you know something. Where in developer sense, we don't have certifications because we have projects. So we demonstrate our knowledge and we demonstrate and we exude our skills and our knowledge through these projects because we can list them for anyone to use. And it's really important to have projects that are deployable. Now, if you're as I keep going back to this example, if you're an embedded systems developer, there's no easy way to deploy these types of applications so that people can use them. But if you're a web developer, host it, give it a domain name, let people to use it, boost its SEO so that, it appears at the top of the search engine when they search the name. If you're a mobile app developer, deploy it to the App Store, whether it's iOS or Android. If it's just a quick, easy payment and then you have to use your parents' account to actually deploy it legally, then that's completely fine. But you really want to get your applications out there if you can. And I think another thing that you really want to focus on is quality over quantity, but quantity still matters. And what I mean by that is you should have at least 3 projects, at the very least 3 projects. If you don't have 3 projects now, start building. Use what you're building at Bay Area Hacks right now and kind of continue after this hackathon and really improve on it so that it's a really good project that you really want to be proud of. But you should have at least 3 projects before you start thinking about quality. And once you have over 3 projects, now you can start thinking about, I want to build quality projects. I want to build different versions of what I have already, because it goes back to emphasis. You should only be emphasizing around 1 to 3 projects on your website or in general on your GitHub or whatever. So you should have at least 3 projects, but it's best to have more. And then you can be able to emphasize 3 of those, however many projects you have. And another thing that you can do is contribute to open source. This is not necessarily a project in and of itself, but it really, really shows to different recruiters that a big part of being in internships is you really have to know certain industry level skills that you wouldn't know as an individual developer. And so, contributing to open source will really show that you know about branching, PRs, merging, working collaboratively with developers you don't even know. So I think that's really, really important and really, really useful is when you're contributing to open source. So everything we were just talking about was basically leading up to this moment of applying. And I think the first problem that a lot of people face, or a lot of people don't take action on, is just applying in general. A lot of people that I know just don't apply for certain position because they already have assumed in their mind that they're not gonna get the position. And the thing is that you really just have to apply. And I think a good quote to follow is to fake it till you make it. And that's not really in the sense that you should lie about what experiences and skills that you have, but instead fake it inside of your own mind and basically say, I am fit for this position, I can handle this, and I can apply for this and potentially get it. And that will kind of trick yourself into applying, whether you think you are, qualified for or not. I know the first time I applied to around 20 or 30, not too many different opportunities. And I thought I would get it, but I didn't. And I only got it on my 3rd try in terms of recruiting rounds. And a few barriers that I've definitely encountered and seen would be, some job listings will say, oh, you're currently in college, or you need a college degree, or you need a Bachelor of Science in CS, or you need to be completing a master's. I've seen junior software engineering jobs that require a PhD, which is absolutely ridiculous. And so the first thing is that you really need to apply on these applications, because there will barely be any internship opportunities that will not have this requirement on it. So if you will not apply to any of them that require you to be in college, you're not really going to be applying to anything, because every single one has this. So you really just kind of need to build almost like a little proxy where when you see it, you don't care. You want to focus more on the skills and the actual qualifications. Second will be insufficient amount of experience, and that ties into the last one. Whether that experience may be college experience or whether that be past work experience, you still want to apply. Now, the last 2 would be past experiences and skills. Or no, not past experience, but skills. Because with skills, there's nowhere you can really hide there, because you can kind of say, I'm not in college, I'm not a graduate, but I think I can handle it. Where it's, I'm a graduate or I'm not a graduate, doesn't matter which one you choose, but I can't handle it because I don't have the skill set that they require. Now, that's something you really have to work on. And so you really have to build up different skills that are required for these internships before you apply. And you can still apply if you think you have insufficient experience and then still learn on the job. But the thing is that you really need to have a good amount of experience before you apply for internships. So a little bit of advice before we end here would be, the first thing, it sounds cliche, but you're definitely going to get rejected. I went through 3 recruiting rounds. The first time I applied to 20 to 30 internships, got rejected from all of them. Second round, I applied for around, I can't remember the exact number, but it was in the hundreds. It was around 100 to 120 or something like that. And I applied to around that many, and I only heard back from 4. And I was lucky enough to get accepted into 2 of those after the interview. And so you really have to build up thick skin and really be comfortable with getting that email where it's just, we're not able to accept you, even after the interview, because that's really where the growth happens, and you really get to learn, like, okay, well, I did this wrong with my application, or maybe I should go back to the drawing board and learn a little bit more about certain skills before I try to apply again. So you're definitely going to get rejected, and you have to learn a lot more. You have to learn a lot more things before you can actually get accepted into these, because there's a lot of things that I can definitely attest to that you will learn, or that you will struggle with when you're on these types of jobs. For example, I went into my first internship and I had decent tech skills. I could, whip out a website really quickly, full stack. I knew my way around, but there are so many things that I didn't know that you would never think of when you're applying for these internships, because they're not on the requirements. For example, writing clean code, making sure that you're commenting, make sure that you're taking days to actually go back and refactor. That when you're building on personal projects, you may be able to push changes straight to master and straight to deployment and production. But in this type of sense, production app has users on it, so you can't push directly to it, because what if it has a bug and you have to run different pipeline deployments to actually revert those changes? But instead, you might have to work on branches. For example, I worked on a branch that was never even merged, and I worked on it for 3 weeks, but it was never merged into production because we decided to go a different route. So you really have to build up that kind of thick skin. But then I've also had branches I worked on for months, and then it was merged, and there was around 300, 400 commits there, because I had to go through so many modifications and refactors. And, there are certain things that you can't learn on your own. Like, for example, collaborating with other developers. That word comes in with open source, because you have to learn about what I just said. Like, you can't push directly to production, but maybe you're going to be working on a branch with 2, 3 other developers. And you're going to have to make sure that you're not running into merge conflicts. And if you do, how are you going to resolve them? How are you going to resolve them in a way that you're not going to overwrite anyone else's changes, and that it's not going to be merged in a way where that different changes are going to be conflicting with each other. So you have to learn a little bit more about that. And sometimes you need to have sub branches. So you have a branch off of production, but then you need to work on certain branches to merge into that branch that's going to be merged into production, or not, sometime in the future. And I think you shouldn't be working or applying for internships if you don't like it, if you don't like coding in general. I assume that if everyone's in this hackathon, that you guys enjoy coding and learning, but I'm sure that there are some out there who don't. And for those who don't, I would say don't apply, no matter how talented you are, because when you apply, you decide to actually get one, and you get one, it's practically taking away an opportunity from maybe someone else who cares a little bit more about you, but they couldn't get the opportunity because you got it, no matter how different your skills are. And third would be to build a lot of projects, like in Bay Area Hacks. For example, one of my best projects, Node.js, was built off of a hackathon I competed in last year in November called Atoms and Bits that I ended up winning. So it's not what I did in that hackathon that made that project really, really good, but it's what I did 2, 3, 4 weeks after, months after that hackathon that made it really, really good. So you really want to use different hackathons like Bay Area Hacks to add to your portfolio. Make sure you're working on these projects after the hackathon. Make sure that you're improving on certain projects that you've worked on before. Build out version 2, build out version 3, build out version 4. Learn a lot about version control because different versions in the future will make it better. So that should be it from me. I know that we started a little bit late and we're ending a little bit late, but if anyone has any questions, I think you can send it into the chat. But you can email me with any more questions at calix@launchtechllc.com. You can also check out my website, calix.dev. I have a blog there. I may be writing a blog on this topic sometime in the future, so you may want to keep an eye on that. And definitely the best place to reach me would be LinkedIn. Feel free to send me a request with a message like, okay, I'm from Bay Area Hacks, and I'll accept. And if you have any questions there, you can definitely ask me there, whether it be technical or not, or anything relating to your career path, definitely ask me there, and I'll be happy to answer.